Hey, what's up guys? In this video I want to talk about the MRCD, or the MultaRadar CD. It is a type of radar gun that's being used for photo radar applications, and the tricky thing about it, it is designed specifically to defeat radar detectors and avoid being detected, well, by radar detector users. And the thing is, it's actually surprisingly effective against many of the different radar detectors on the market. You actually do need a radar detector that's specifically designed for MRCD detection in order to pick it up. But let's talk a little bit more about the MRCD, what it is, how it works, and then what you can do to combat it. So the thing about MRCD, it's typically set up in terms of photo radar applications, like I mentioned, where basically it's set up on a vehicle, a truck or a car, alongside a camera. And then they have the radar, K-band radar, shooting down the street, and then when you drive by, if you're speeding, the camera takes a picture of your car and they mail you a ticket. So photo radar. Now, the tricky thing about it is it can be very difficult to detect. Even radar detectors that can pick it up, you're only going to get a few blocks of range, maybe 1 to 3 blocks typically against the MRCD, so not crazy amounts of range. And again, there's a lot of radar detectors that aren't even going to alert at all. You can drive right past the MRCD truck and your radar detector is going to be silent. There's other radar detectors that are not designed to detect the MRCD, but you can detect it if you disable some of the filters on K-band, which means, yes, it can detect it. It'll give you a very short duration alert and only at close range, but it's also going to be false alerting constantly. And so, yes, it can technically detect it, but not in a useful fashion to where you're going to be paying attention when it goes off, right? Now, the third issue is there's no differentiation between, one of the many K-band false alerts that you're going to be experiencing and what's actually a legitimate low-powered MRCD threat. And, you're really going to need to tell the difference because you don't have much range and you need to react relatively quickly. Now, as I just mentioned, it's a low-powered radar gun. There's a couple different things that they've done to attempt to defeat radar detectors. One is they've designed it to be, just for close-range operation, and so it does have reduced power levels, which makes it tougher to detect. They've also done some additional tricks, including some stuff regarding polarization and frequency modulation that does make it more difficult to detect. Now, that said, there's a couple different options that we have to defeat the MRCD. One is you can run Waze on your phone, and people will mark, in the app when they see a cop or an MRCD truck or something, and that's a good way to get notified. Another option that I'm seeing up in Edmonton is there's actually Facebook groups where people are actively, saying where they're seeing the MRCD trucks in real time and updating it, constantly throughout the day. Maybe not the greatest thing to use while you're driving, but that's another thing that people are using. Now, like Waze, another thing that's really good while you're driving is going to be a radar detector with MRCD detection capabilities. And so there's a couple key differences between a traditional radar detector and one that's designed for MRCD detection. The first thing is, well, it's designed to detect the MRCD, so it's capable of doing it, and, giving you sufficient range, which again is typically in the order of maybe 1 to 3 blocks or so. So not crazy range, but able to do it. The second thing is it's able to detect the MRCD independent of your K-band filters. So you can have your BSM filtering, you can have all your other stuff going on, and you can still have your MRCD detection going on at the same time. Or maybe you can do MRCD and just have K-band off altogether if K-band itself isn't used in your area. So you have some independent control between MRCD and traditional K-band alerting. The third thing is, again, it's going to be able to differentiate, MRCD as opposed to just another K-band alert. It'll be something like, a voice announcement saying this is MRCD, or saying that it's a low-powered alert, or perhaps a different audio tone, but basically a unique way to identify MRCD versus a different radar signal.
MultaRadar. MultaRadar. MultaRadar CD. Radar, low power.
But basically a unique way to identify MRCD versus a different radar signal. Now, there's a couple different radar detectors from different manufacturers that are all designed and able to detect the MRCD. We've got radar detectors from Stinger, from Escort, from NetRadar, from Redenso, and Uniden is working on MRCD detection as well. And so there's a variety of different options. Now, as far as which one is the best, it used to be the Stinger. It did a really good job, but now we've got more options with NetRadar and Redenso is looking especially good at MRCD detection. Here's a quick clip from the RCM to show you it running against the MRCD, and there's a couple things that you're going to notice. One is you're going to see good MRCD detection, and two, you're also going to see that that MRCD truck, it's marked with a GPS alert, and so you're going to notice that it's not only detecting the MRCD, and it's ramping up to the signal, which is kind of unique to Redenso, but it's also going to give you the distance, which is a GPS-based feature, not a radar-based feature. So you kind of have two things going on at once. But let's play this clip here, courtesy of Dukes, with the RCM running against an MRCD truck.
MultaRadar. Speed cam.
Something else that I like about it is the fact that you can disable MRCD detection on the rear. And the reason I say that's helpful is MRCD in Edmonton, again, this is kind of the area where it's like most actively used. It's typically aimed at the rear of vehicles, not at the front of your vehicle as you're driving towards the radar gun. And the reason that's the case is up in Edmonton, in Alberta, they only have rear license plates. They don't run license plates on the front of their vehicles. And so the MRCD truck will be set up alongside of the road, and it's clocking traffic going this way. Once it passes it, it takes a picture of the vehicle from behind. And now it's because it's pointed, you know, on the opposite direction, it makes it tougher for vehicles coming this way to pick up that signal. And so again, they're more reliant on reflections of that signal coming back, right? Now, what happens is when you're picking it up in this direction, you're not going to get too much range, but once you pass the source, because it's hitting you from behind, if you have a rear antenna that's pointed backwards toward the MRCD, you're going to get really long range, which would be nice if you were driving towards it this way, but it becomes really excessive if you've already passed the source and you've passed the kill zone and you're getting way, way longer alerts, you know, even longer than when you were approaching it initially. Now, this is kind of something that I've noticed is a difference between, say, the Stinger VIP, for example, and the Redenso RCM. The Stinger has good MRCD detection, but if you have two antennas, it'll do a good job of alerting you with the front antenna as you're getting towards the source, but once you pass it, you're going to be getting really, really long, unnecessarily long alerts from behind. With the Redenso RCM, on the other hand, you have the ability to maybe turn on MRCD in the front and then disable it from behind where you don't really need it so much. So once you pass the source, you know, the alert is then going to go away and you're done. And so I really like that capability as well. There's a lot of kind of unique stuff that they're doing with the RCM, which is really, really helpful for people who encounter the MRCD. And again, in Edmonton, I know it's used constantly, and so people will encounter it 5 to 6 times a day. You know, very heavy enforcement there. So little things like that can actually make a really big difference. Now, for those of you guys who have some additional questions regarding the MRCD, or you're wondering, you know, what's the best MRCD detector and all that kind of typical stuff, hop onto RDF and specifically, well, the Canadians, as I've mentioned throughout this video, they're a lot more well-versed and experienced with the MRCD because they see it so often. This is a radar gun that originally originated over in Europe. It made its way over into Canada, and now it's actually starting to show up in the US. We're seeing it in New York. I've heard rumors about it showing up in Texas. It seems to be kind of one of those things where it's slowly starting to spread, you know, and it's nice to maybe have a detector that supports it, even if you don't maybe necessarily need it yet, as kind of a sense of, you know, future-proofing. So in most of the US, we don't need it, but it's definitely good to be aware of it and just to recognize in case it shows up, yes, you have options, here's how it works, and here's what you can do about it. So anyways, there's a look at the MRCD, how it works, and, well, what your options are to defeat it and detect it. So awesome. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you guys have found this helpful. Again, I'll have links in the video description to the different detectors that are able to pick it up and where you can hop onto RDF for more Q&A and discussion and whatnot on the MRCD and what you can do about it. So awesome. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.